Gujaratis have a lot of obsession with food, a bit too much. I realize how passionate you can be when you find something which has purpose.
ये हेल्दी की ऑब्सेशन कहाँ से आई? हेल्दी फूड की ऑब्सेशन?
At a certain age, I think I figured out I want to do something of my own.
Okay.
Question was what? That I hadn't figured out. So when I was noticing a trend in our office that, typically around 4:35, we would always be munching on something. So one day we would send our office boy down. He would get all those, Balaji, Lays and all of that. So that's when I started thinking that what if we had healthier options?
यूजुअली वी थिंक अबाउट कि अब 10th हो गया, कॉमर्स लेना है, साइंस लेना है, बायो लेना है, क्या लेना है, यू वर टेकिंग इंटर्नशिप्स.
Taking a day off is something I'm just very uncomfortable with.
Sometimes it comes with a guilt also. कितना एफर्ट लगा तो एजुकेट कंज्यूमर्स.
So a lot actually. Health as a concept that time was so different, you'll be shocked. Snacking in India is a very indulgent meal as well. You get a craving, it's not a planned meal. Because you don't plan, you'll end up grabbing whatever you find around you.
Healthy snacking has seen a huge surge in the last few years. And today we have someone who is at the forefront of shaping the industry with his brand. Hi, I'm Abhishansa Mathur, founder and editor of Local Samosa. And today at this Localpreneur Podcast, we have Aditya Sanghavi, founder of Snackible. We will delve into the basics of founding a healthy snacking brand, about his journey and much more. Hi Aditya, thank you for being here.
Hi, great being here. Thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure. So before we start into the journey of Snackible, we want to delve into you, Aditya Sanghavi, who is from Maharashtra but actually a Guju. So tell us more about your childhood.
Sure. I mean, usually I start with the business, but happy to start with, my childhood as well. Born, brought up in Bombay. Went to school in Bombay, in South Bombay, went to HR college, pretty standard childhood, I would say. Then went to UK to do a degree in business and finance from Cardiff Business School. A reason I went to UK was because I didn't get into the best universities in US. Reason I got into business and finance as a field was because my dad used to be in finance. I thought that was a line to get into. Okay. I always had this itch to do something different, but I hadn't figured it out like most, college kids don't. But I think when I went to college, I suddenly got access to an amazing campus, amazing, faculty, right? And realized that maybe I can do something, bigger as well. And that's when my entrepreneurship bug set in, right? And I remember we had this entrepreneurship cell in the university. And so Cardiff is essentially in Wales, which is as good as a country. And the government there essentially told the university that if any student has a good idea, we are happy to fund it because they have a lot of land and, they just have a lot of resources which are not being used. So they want to do something with it. So I came up with this idea with another person in, who was also studying to come up with this vertical farming kind of a startup idea. It was too ahead of its times, to be honest. And but it was a great, experience in, you can say testing entrepreneurship. And that's when the bug set in, I realized how passionate you can be when you find something which has purpose. So I came back to India, obviously, because the land of opportunities, slightly tougher times when I came back. There was this, I think 2011-12, the financial meltdown had still not fully recovered. Finance as an area was also going through, financial institutions and all were not hiring very easily. And while I was looking at finance as a field, I did think that, hey, is that what I want to get into? If I want to eventually start up, definitely I want to get some work experience.
Right.
But is finance the field I want to get the experience in? Because I'd done a few internships. I knew that it's not a cakewalk, right? And you don't get a lot of your knowledge which you develop is very bookish, and a lot of your initial years are more focused on a desk, right? So that's when I came across a very interesting consulting firm which was focusing on startups and SMEs. Right? They were working with some of the leading e-commerce startups which are starting to grow at that point of time. That entire startup wave which started in 2012 and went on. Obviously, it's still going on to a certain extent. And so I joined them. It was a very lean team to start with. Essentially focusing on a bouquet of financial services which we were providing to startups like Pepperfry, Nika, a lot of VC funded startups, a lot of SMEs. So I worked very closely with the founders of many of these companies. I worked with their CFOs, understood their business model, and that gave me even more encouragement to dive into entrepreneurship, right? And that's where I think in 2015 I took a call. Listen, I need to do something. Started thinking of a few ideas, and that's been my journey before Snackable,
Nice.
I would say. Yeah.
So the idea of finance, you said, was it because your parents are also from business background or they are from service industry?
So my father, my mom has always been a housemaker, and my dad has been in the finance field. He had his own boutique financial services firm.
Okay.
And you can say financial investment banking, management consulting, and the likes. So yes, he did come from a finance background. I always knew I didn't want to join him,
Okay.
right? And even he wanted me to do something on my own, at least for the initial years. The question was, what do I do, right? And because he came from finance, he always spoke about it. I was always exposed to that at work discussions, right? I always thought finance is a good field to get into, right? But I did a few internships as well in that field and realized that it's not something where my passion lies, right? I wasn't always that excited by the work that I was doing. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I was exploring finance, but decided not to take it further.
So the reason you didn't join him would be?
So there's no particular reason. I always knew that. See, at a certain age, I think I figured out I want to do something of my own, right?
Okay.
Question was what that I hadn't figured out.
Okay.
So I think to do something of your own, you need to go through a certain journey, right? You can't be cushioned, right?
Right.
You can't live in a bubble. And the thing with family is you'll always be in a bubble. So I always knew that I had to go out in the real world, do a real job, right? Push myself, go outside my comfort zone, because those are the experiences which will lead you to build a great startup, right? And hence, joining my dad's business was never a conscious decision which I would ever make,
Okay.
at least in the initial years.
And what are the learnings that you learned from your father? Like you've seen कोई financial learnings थी उनकी या फिर कोई personality traits जो उनके जो आप में आए हैं?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we are a product of our parents, right? A lot of qualities come from them. And, being in a family which has always promoted a lot of entrepreneurship, we used to live in a joint family. So there were always discussions around businesses. And I started working very early, right? Internships. So got a lot of experience there.
How old were you when you started?
So I think after the 10th grade, I did my first internship in a stock brokerage firm. And very interesting experience, to learn how the entire stock market functions, go into that BSc building and every day. And the energy was something completely different. But yeah, that being said, learned a lot of things. I think, I think one thing is, that persistence, I think, which is one of the most important qualities for a startup founder, to be extremely persistent. And I think that's something which, I learned from my parents. I think obsession, which kind of overlaps with persistence, but I think you need to be obsessed, right? Whether it's your business, it's your customer, right? And that's something else which I learned, right? Discipline and I think ethics more than anything. They were very big on ethics, right? So, ethics obviously in a household is very different than a business, but a lot of the values have come from there.
And something that you learned from your mother or you being in a joint family that has taught you that you are still taking it ahead?
Yeah. No, I think a lot of these qualities are from both my parents. I would give both of them credit for it. And yeah, I mean, I think from my mother, I think very interestingly, I learned how to, adapt very quickly and be agile, right? To different situations and not be stuck up and be stubborn, right? And which is a very important quality in a startup, because you can't be emotionally attached to a decision, right? If it's not working for you, you need to have the ability to let go and immediately pivot, right? So I would say that.
like you started very early, around when you were in 10th standard, like you started exploring more on
Yeah.
internships. Was there a mindset that you want to start working from very now on? Was there a reason that you want to feel independent at that moment?
Not exactly. I think I was always brought up in an environment that, you have to put in the work, right? If you want to achieve anything in life. And education obviously was one area, and work experience is another area. I think getting an edge in life, I mean, that Malcolm Gladwell has that thing, 10,000 hours, right? So I truly believe in that. I think to be really good at something, the more hours you put in, the better you'll be. And especially if you're planning to start early. I mean, not that I had any plans of entrepreneurship at that
Mm-hmm.
point of time, but I mean, I knew that the faster I start learning how a work environment works, how how a typical business operates, and understand markets, understand the financial services space, the better I would be when I actually go out there into the world and start working, right? So I think uh, that was one intention, and second was after 10th standard. I mean, what do you do, right? I mean,
या यूजुअली वी थिंक अबाउट कि अब 10th हो गया, कॉमर्स लेना है, साइंस लेना है, बायो
right.
लेना है, क्या लेना है, यू वर टेकिंग इंटर्नशिप्स.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people, I mean, it all depends. I think everyone has had very diverse experiences before they go out into the real world. Especially today, it's become so competitive. Like we get interns all the time, right?
Right.
And we get really young people who are so determined and so passionate, right? So I think internships are a great way to get a snapshot of the real world, right? And figure out what your priorities are. And I'm glad that, I started a little early. And yeah, I always enjoyed working. Yeah, I think, people at a young age always have a bad perception of work. And sometimes society makes you believe that work is something you just have to go 9 to 5, finish,
Right.
come back home, and bring home a salary, essentially. You work to live, the rest of your life. Uh, I think work is a part of your life, right? You need to be able to enjoy what you're doing. And I've always somehow liked whatever I landed up in.
So whatever, like be it job, be it consulting, be it
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah,
entrepreneurship, you
yeah.
have loved everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've also been fortunate. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there are people who have been in challenging work situations where the work environment is toxic, or where they don't have the right leadership, right, guiding them. There are many work environments like that, but I think I've been fortunate to always be in good environments, with really good people guiding me, right, in jobs as well. And I've tried to retain that culture even in my company, right? We have a very flat organization. Anyone can ask anyone questions. Anyone can walk into my cabin, right? So I think that's very important. Culture makes a very big difference, right? Yeah, I've been lucky to be exposed to those kind of environments, and hence I've obviously loved what I do everywhere and got to learn a lot.
So speaking of culture, how do you maintain a culture in your organization?
Yeah, I think that's the toughest thing to maintain, because see, what happens is startups hire young people, right? And young people have a lot of ambition. So after a few years, they want to do an MBA, or they want to go into another line, right? Retaining talent is difficult, right,
Right.
in a startup. And even if you do manage to retain some of the good people, culture is something which keeps evolving, according to me. So I think building a culture starts from obviously leadership, right? So I have to set a standard. For example, we don't have an environment where people can scream at each other, or
Right.
we have much more efficient ways of dealing with any lack of performance or lack of tasks being completed, right? We obviously do a lot of team activities together. We have those monthly meetings where we sit and discuss different things. There's a lot of interdepartmental communication which happens, especially in a startup. That's necessary more than anything.
Right.
So yeah, there are quite a few things that we do. I believe culture. It's tough to pinpoint and tell you exactly what builds the culture. I think it's a lot about people just coming together and enjoying working with each other, right? If that happens, I think you create an environment where people can thrive. And I think that's very important. So I think the most important thing, if I had to sum it up, would be giving a platform to anyone who joins this organization, whether it's an intern, whether it's a senior resource, to essentially get autonomy, get a lot of responsibility, and do things their way, even if it means that they'll end up making mistakes initially. As long as they learn from their mistakes, right?
Right.
As long as they have done those mistakes with the best of intents, but things have just not gone their way. Because if you give that environment to someone, because I started very early, right? Now, when I started, when I was, I think, 25, right? And that time, I didn't have a food background. I didn't have a business background. I mean, I've never run a business. I'd worked with a consulting firm for a brief period of time. That was the only work experience and a job environment I'd had. So, the biggest struggle I had was because society makes you believe that you can only achieve so much. Like if you don't have an MBA, you can't do this. If you don't have an IIM degree, you can't get into investment banking, or you can't start a startup, right? But I have realized the hard way that we are, as humans, capable of doing much more than we can imagine. If we are put in the right environment and pushed to the limits, we'll be able to achieve whatever we want at whatever age.
As you mentioned, where you come from a finance background where you have seen very early on you went to do some internships. पर हमेशा फाइनेंस में ये कल्चर नहीं होता है कि देयर इज अ फ्लैट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नोबडी इज स्क्रीमिंग और ईच अदर बिकॉज देयर इज मनी इन्वॉल्व्ड अ लॉट ऑफ इट्स नॉट इजी एंड एकदम ऐसा कल्चर मेंटेन करना मतलब जहाँ पे आपने पहले देखा होगा वहाँ पे ये नहीं रहा होगा राइट सो वाज इट अ कॉन्शियस डिसीजन मतलब क्योंकि अर्ली जो आपने देखा वो अलग था और अब जो है वो आपका कल्चर अलग है.
So, see, again, like I said, I was fortunate enough to be in very good work environments. But that being said, definitely, I mean, what you're saying is completely accurate. I mean, the minute a hierarchy is involved, right? And there are multiple layers of, superiors, and there's a typical work culture which is set up, right? Juniors can't go and tell the CEO something and things like that. So, but fortunately, in my work experience in the consulting firm I was working with, I had a great boss, right? He was very similar in terms of mindset and culture. Again, hired me when I was really young and gave me a lot of responsibility. Told me one day, listen, we want to start the Bangalore operations. Can you fly down next week and just start it? Right. And again, put me in very uncomfortable positions, but also very exciting positions. So like and that's what made me realize, you're capable of doing much more than you can imagine. Like within, I think 1 month, I set up a team, got a few clients, and, built that to a pretty large setup, right, for the company. So I think a lot of the leadership skills that I have, in terms of managing team, I also have learned from him. That was a great work environment to be in. Again, a very flat organization. Because it was a small consulting firm. Obviously, we grew very fast. So we were like about 85 people at one point of time. Everyone had a say, right?
Coming back to your childhood and your personal interest, you mentioned you are a foodie.
Yeah.
And you are a Gujarati. So you tell me about your food choices, your love for food, your explorations.
No, I've always, I think, loved food a bit too much. I've always, I would say, struggled with weight a bit when I was a kid as well, because I used to love food too much. But I believe, food has been something which I've been very passionate about since childhood. Again, it's a family thing as well. I mean, Gujaratis have this, like, a lot of obsession with food, a bit too much. Like, I remember in Gujarati culture, it's very normal. Like, lunch will be like your, what you call sada food, like roti, sabji, dal. And dinner will never be that. Okay. There's this voting mechanism which is set up in every household. Who will, what will we make tonight? Then it's decided, and there'll be all these westernized dishes like pasta. And I remember having pesto pasta before it came into restaurants. And so it's a Mexican food is a very big deal. So I've got a lot of exposure to food. My parents are also foodies, so they used to keep taking us to restaurants, and that time there were very few in Bombay. I remember there was this New Yorkers, which was like a very big deal for us. New Yorkers and Cream Center. I don't know if you're aware, in South Bombay. So I got exposed to food very early, and different kinds of food. And obviously, then we did a little bit of traveling abroad, so got exposed to different food cultures. Right, being vegetarian, obviously, it was limited, but that really guided my passion towards food. And food is something which till date, I'm very passionate about.
What is something from Gujarati food that you love?
So there's this, I think, it's the most boring vegetable, I think, for most people, but it's called basically aloo gobi, right? It's like the way my mother makes it, it's amazing. So that's something which I always have loved.
एंड देन ये हेल्दी की ऑब्सेशन कहाँ से आई? हेल्दी
Yeah.
फूड की ऑब्सेशन?
No, interesting question. So again, to be very honest, I was working in that consulting firm. It was going well, and like I told you, at one point we were about 80, 85 people, right? And I decided by then that hey, I want to start something, right? So me and two other colleagues, we were coming up with different ideas. In fact, we were discussing them with our boss also. He very well knew, and they obviously had some very interesting idea in the NGO space, whereas I was more leaning towards food. So why food again? Because I've always been passionate. I thought food is a very interesting area to disrupt through technology, right? That time there were not this Swiggy, Zomato was like almost non-existent. They had just started deliveries and all, and even the food delivery apps and all were not too many, right? So I was thinking, in fact, of a very hyper local, the tiffin service that we all have, right? In Bombay, the dabba wala delivers.
Right.
And there are these aunties from different households who make food, right? And then the dabba wala will get them clients and, or they'll get it through some word of mouth.
Right.
And then they'll be servicing like 30, 40 dabbas a day. So I was thinking, how do we put that into a tech platform, right? How do we aggregate them, have ratings for them, right? Their top dishes, their menus, basically, organize that sector essentially. So that tomorrow, if I've just shifted to Bombay and if I want Gujarati food, which I miss, right, I can go based on cuisine, based on the food that she generally makes, pick someone, right? Tomorrow, if I want to switch, I can switch, right? And everything is streamlined. In fact, a very interesting model, Hola Chef did that. I think they had started, I think 1 year after I started Snackable. But for whatever reason, it didn't work out.
I think Yummy Tiffins also did, and they're still working.
Yeah, maybe. There were a few, but no one had integrated tech, right? And what they eventually did, what was happening was with scale, it's very difficult to scale this up because eventually a household woman, a homemaker, has limited capacity. However big her kitchen is, she can't do 500 dabbas a day, right? So eventually what most of these companies landed up doing is creating a centralized kitchen, and then you lose the essence of it, right? And the reason I didn't go into it was not that. I didn't go into it because I just felt hyper local logistics was the biggest challenge. When I did the study, that time, see, Swiggy, Zomato, the dark kitchens and cloud kitchens were not there.
Right.
So basically what you had to do was hire a fleet of staff who will literally go from your restaurant to every pin code in and around that to deliver, right? And while obviously, dabba walas were there, I knew that eventually I would have to switch to something like this, right? So that's why I didn't end up getting into that. Outside of the fact that consistency, quality, all those issues will come up. Organizing a sector is quite difficult. And that's when I was noticing a trend in our office that, typically around 4:35, we would always be munching on something. So one day we would send our office boy down. He would get all those, Balaji, Lays and all of that. Then one day we would order something on Swiggy from McDonald's or something. And always he would complain about it, right? But we would not have any other option, right, which we could come up with. Not that we would discuss it because, when you don't know there is a solution, you don't even imagine there is one, right? So that's when I started thinking that what if we had healthier options? And this started because we had some weight losing competition in the office. And, a lot of us lost a lot of weight, tried to incorporate a lot of healthy things in the diet, and again failed at finding things other than fruits and salads. And kitna khaoge, right? Fruits and salads, because snacking in India is a very indulgent meal as well, right? It's something which is, you get a craving. It's not a planned meal. It's very impulse driven. So you usually don't plan, right? Second, and because you don't plan, you'll end up grabbing whatever you find around you, right? That's why these kirana stores do so well. Today, unorganized snacks is a way bigger market than organized snacks, right? And unorganized retail is again much bigger than organized retail, because typically a person is walking on the road, they're like, acha chalo kuch khana hai, they buy a packet of potato chips for 10 rupees and eat it. So I started thinking that, hey, how do we build a brand which is actually giving healthy snacks, and do we even need to? So I went to in the market, I went to Nature's Basket, I went to Food Hall, all the premium stores, right? And they had quite a few options, about 5 or 6 options abhi the, compared to now, to much lesser. And most of them were imported, right? Priced at 300 rupees for a packet of chips, just because it's imported, right? It's Hawa eventually, so they have to charge the premium. So that's when I realized, wow, this could be an interesting market, and not knowing much. And I think, being naive at a young age is sometimes your biggest advantage. Like if I'd overanalyzed the market, studied market trends, figured out that healthy snacks won't grow. Right now, it's a small market. It'll take some time to grow. I may not have ever entered that space,
Okay.
right? But that's what led me to realize, hey, this problem which I saw in front of me led me to think, hey, let's start something here. I studied some Western models. There's a company called Graze in UK, which finally sold to Unilever for about $150 million. There's a company called Nature Box, which was doing very well.
Right.
They all had a subscription model, right? And I noticed again from that tiffin model, as well as, my typical work environment where none of us have time to sit and order. I was like, if I want to start, firstly, I want to start an online first brand.
Right.
Okay. It was still early to start online first brands. D2C as a term was not even existing at that point of time. But I knew I wanted to start online because I wanted to use tech to scale. Second, I wanted to, ensure that it's convenient for people, right? Because typically work people don't have the time to go on a website and order all the time. So we created a subscription model out of it, right? You subscribe to a weekly box or a monthly box, and every month or every week you get a box of snacks, and you can even go and select the snacks through some basic tech modifications. We had built that also, and we were so proud of it. And we thought, wow, it's going to be disruptive, right? And we launched and realized a couple of things. One is obviously subscription doesn't work in India that well. Healthy snacks as a market was also very small that time, right? That was the reason why not many brands were also there, right? So yeah, interesting realizations, and that was the start of the journey essentially.
Why do you think subscription model doesn't work in India?
So multiple reasons. I think again, this is my opinion, and I'm sure over a period of time that changes. Based on my experience, I think there are only 2 subscriptions that work in India, which is also now changing to a certain extent: milk and newspapers. Okay. OTT obviously is the latest member of the club,
Right.
but I would say online OTT subscriptions are very different, as you know, right? Secondly, payment infrastructure. Okay, now we have those UPI auto payments and all. That time there were no auto payments. So if you subscribe, you have to pay upfront for the entire period. What is the use? Like, say if I'm buying 6 months ka subscription, I have to pay 6 months ka fee on day one. So what we used to do is obviously discount it and give them offers, make it a 1 month subscription, then you can renew it. So if it's especially a weekly box, make it a 3 month subscription, give them discounts. But eventually customers are like, why will I go out of pocket and buy something? If I'm subscribing to it, might as well go every month and order it. That's the thinking, right? Thirdly, subscription is a very first world concept. Okay. In first world countries now, they have the per capita income is much higher, right? The purchasing power is much higher. Subscribing to small things, the payment infrastructure is better. So subscriptions used to work very well in the first world countries. But India is, I mean, for us, the daily struggle is getting to office, getting work done, coming back, right? We have too many problems to think, acha, chalo, subscribe karte hain. Right? We are not going to lock in our capital. Exactly. So we are not such big pre-planners that chalo 6 mahine ke liye subscribe karte hain. So those were some of the reasons, I feel. And I think one of the key drivers was obviously this entire payment infrastructure bit, because recurring payments ke bina, it's very difficult.
What was the year you started?
2015.
And you said that the market was very early for healthy snacking. So,
Yeah.
And you started without, मतलब यूजुअली अगर कोई आपको कहता है कि बिजनेस स्टार्ट करो तो बिजनेस मॉडल देखो, मार्केट कितना है, क्या स्कोप है, यू स्टार्टेड विदाउट इट. तो कितना एफर्ट लगा टू एजुकेट कंज्यूमर्स?
So a lot actually. So when we started, obviously we realized a couple of things, right? One is, yeah, subscription model nahi chal raha hai. So we immediately found a solution to that. We pivoted into a typical
How much time did you
3
do?
months or something.
Okay.
We still have the subscription model. We have a few loyal customers who subscribe to it, but our core business is a typical vertically integrated e-commerce model. You come in, choose what you want, order, and it reaches you, right? So that was our main business model. Now, slowly, it was very tough to get traction, right? So that's when we started studying, acha, market में क्यों हम नहीं establish कर पा रहे हैं? And that's when we realized a couple of things, right? One is online grocery as a segment had not scaled up as much as some of the other e-commerce segments, right? That time it was predominantly horizontal players like Nykaa had, Pepper Fry and Furniture.
Yeah.
Then there were the larger marketplaces like Amazon and Flipkart. So D2C as a concept had not yet set in one. The only person in grocery which had succeeded was Big Basket. Okay, a lot of the other guys had come, but they hadn't been able to scale up, or they had shut down, like Local Banya and the likes. So Big Basket was the only one who had established. Now we are in grocery, where anyway online grocery is a subset. Okay, a small portion of the total grocery market. Within online grocery, we are in snacks, which is an impulse category. Okay, within snacks, we are in healthy snacks. Okay, which is a niche. So we are a niche within a niche within a niche. So then also you're not selling on Big Basket, you're not selling on Marketplace, because that time grocery, brands were not, that snack brands were not getting that listed, right? You are selling on your own website. So you're expecting someone to discover your website, come on your website, make the purchase, then keep coming back again. So, it was basically that, in Bombay, they call it Kolaba to Bandra kind of a belt business. It was that. Right, it was a little niche, right? And we had some great products. That was the main thing. So I think our biggest ammunition, I remember in the starting, was word of mouth, right? Because people would just spread the word that, hey, there's this really cool subscription model. There's this, brand which is doing some very innovative snacks. We had very differentiated snacks as well. So people started coming to us. And, health as a concept that time was so different. You'll be shocked. That time, health was like, I remember going to these events and all. The only question I would be asked, is this healthy? Is this fried or baked? Right? Fried or roasted, fried or baked, right? So that was the concept of health. Abhi people ask which ingredient you're using, which oil you're using, what is the calorie count, right? What is the macro balance, right? What is the protein content? Like the consumer has become so much more educated. So to answer your question, I think consumer education was very difficult in the starting. And that's when we realized what is the cheapest way to educate customers, because we are a young brand with limited capital. We realized it was social media, right? Like, now it sounds like it's a normal way to go, but that time it was we were still figuring out, should we be online focused, should we be offline? So we really took a call to focus on our social media. That time Instagram was just coming up, it was on the rise in terms of brands using it to market. Before it was mainly Facebook. So we started developing some very good content, right? Our second employee, I remember, was a photographer, hobbyist photographer. So he was managing marketing, but would take really good photos. So we would keep putting up great content every day. And if you see our social media today, all built organically and with some great content. Like if you see the number of posts that we have, it's as good as, if you just divide the years we have been in existence, it's as good. The average comes to about 3 posts a week, which is quite consistent, right? So, essentially social media was a great tool to educate people. Physical events was a great way to, educate people. So initially it was वैसे ही था.
Physical events ने help किया कि because people go and taste तो product first hand experience होता है. Were physical events like Fleas helped you?
Yeah, definitely. In the starting, see, your brand is so young. Today, yes, what impact will an event make? Yes, it'll get me some visibility, it'll get me some sales. That time, our 1 month ka half sales would come from sometimes an event, right? A good event, right? So events were a big deal that time. When you're a young brand, I think it's a great platform to connect with customers, because being again an online business, getting that feedback loop is a little difficult in the initial years, right? Yes, you get a lot of data online, but qualitative feedback is very important in food, right? And that you can only get when you meet people physically, make them try the snacks, right? And get their actual feedback. So I think events are a great platform for that. So definitely events is something, I would recommend anyone to start with.
From, to start a business, and especially in a healthy snacking brand, tell me in a layperson language, like from the idea to the execution of sales, like procurement of your ingredients, manufacturers, or giving out to vendors. What is that? What is the process?
Yeah. So typically how it starts with is an idea, right? I'll start from scratch, right? We had created this Google sheet when I started the business, and we still stick to that. Principally, we just feel we should use that. And it's basically a list of all the ideas that we have come up with for products. Now, these ideas obviously are a function of primary and secondary research. So today we have an R&D team, right, who actually does a lot of research in the market.
Okay.
What is happening in the West? What ingredients can we bring which are trending in the West to India, right? What are the traditional Indian snacks which we can healthify, right? What are the macro profiles which we can focus on, right? What are the dietary preferences which are growing, right? So all that primary and secondary research leads to a bucket of ideas, right? That listen, these are the products which we can focus on. And this could come from a marketing person, sales person, admin person, or R&D person, the idea itself, right? And then obviously there's research done around it. Then we decide, okay, these are the ideas we want to pursue. Once we decide that, we start experimenting. So R&D team will create samples. Okay, before we had just a stove and one, that vessel to make things and try things, because snacking is not that much rocket science. Then now we have a proper setup in our warehouse. We have a proper oven and things like that. The basic technology which is required to make, those moisture control things and all of that. So now what we do is,
what are the things that you need to like?
It's honestly very simple. I mean, most of the snacks, a lot of our snacks are made using very specific technologies, which we can't test in-house. Like vacuum frying is an industrial level, large-scale technology. Extrusion is a large-scale technology. You can't test it in-house. So there we have contract manufacturers who we go to their facilities and test it. Right? We either pay them to give us some privacy and give us an entire facility for some time, or we work with them saying that, listen, we want to work with you to make this product, and these are manufacturers who are working with us. But otherwise, the standard is, oven, basic microwave, and the stove, and there's this moisture control machine to check how much moisture, because moisture plays a very important role in shelf life, right? So we may bake a cracker, but if the moisture is high in that, we know it's not going to last beyond a 15-day shelf life.
Okay.
Whereas if the moisture is less, the chance of it lasting longer is higher, right? The biggest enemy to snacks is oxygen and moisture, right? So testing all that is very important. And we have all these labs. So a lot of the technical aspects of the product are tested in the labs. We don't invest in all that machinery.
So you can get access to these labs easily, like connect to these labs?
Very easy. They are a service provider, na? So you just have to send samples. We generally find labs which are NABL registered. So they are, for exports and all, it becomes much easier. And essentially, we just send them samples literally within 2 or 3 days with the parameters on an email. In 2 or 3 days, we get the results. We keep doing that. Lab cost is a very standard cost in our P&L, it's something which we have to incur. And the equipment that they have, how much ever you bring in-house, I feel it's always better to rely on the people who specialize in it, right? So coming back, it starts with this idea.
Right.
Then once it's shortlisted, we do some recipe testing internally, right? We do a sensory analysis. Now we have developed customer target groups. So there are these target groups based on demographic, like age, gender, geography, and we send them these samples. Okay. We test them with them. We do internal testing as well. And then once it gets selected, we go to the next stage. Next stage is industrial testing. So we'll actually go to one of our contract manufacturers who specializes. Now we have a range of contract manufacturers. They specialize in different verticals. So for example, for baking and roasting, we'll have 3 or 4 manufacturers. For vacuum frying, we'll have 2 manufacturers. For, different technologies, pop chips, like the high pressure popping technology, we have 1 manufacturer. So we'll go to these manufacturers' facilities, test the recipe out. Another thing which we need to do is also master the seasoning. Okay. Seasoning plays a very important role in the taste and mouthfeel of the snack, right? And especially in India, because we love our flavors, that spicy and tangy and chatpata. So we work very closely with seasoning companies.
Okay.
These are large companies who manufacture these seasonings, right? And they obviously customize that seasoning for us based on what profile we want, right? And then once the seasoning is ready, the snack is ready, we combine both and launch it. Now, once we launch it, it gets interesting. So typically, idea to launch for us is about 2.5 months. Okay, which is extremely fast for FMCG. Typically, a large-scale FMCG company, I don't want to take names, would take anywhere from 6 to 18 months sometimes to launch a product, right? And there's 6 teams involved. What we have done is created such a agile innovation engine internally that we can launch very quickly, test the product. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't work, remove it. Right.
Okay.
So after we launch for about 3 months, we test the products on 6 different metrics. Okay. And based on the success or failure of these metrics, we decide whether the product stays or not. It could be as simple as repeat product rate. Could be as simple as, total sales as a percentage of total product sales as a percentage of total sales. So we have launched over 110 products till date. Today we have 80 plus in our portfolio. 30 products have just been eliminated because they didn't fulfill this criteria. Right. So that's essentially our entire innovation engine. Then comes the inventory and supply chain. I'll just quickly run you through it.
Yeah.
We have a very quick inventory cycle. We only keep 15 days of stock because we have a very wide range of SKUs. So what we can't overstock product, right? And we'll need a lot of infrastructure. We'll need working capital investments because if we keep more stock, we have to pay the vendor earlier before we have got the money from the customer.
Right.
So what we do is we at any point will keep 15 days of stock. So we have a weekly, most of our manufacturers are in and around Maharashtra. Some of them are outside also. So we have a weekly supply chain with them. Okay. So every week they'll send us POs, right? We'll raise a monthly PO and every week they'll send us stock, right? Or every if it's a little far off or if it takes a little bit of time for production and all, every 15 days the stock comes. And once the stock comes, we obviously start packaging it into, different boxes as orders of customers and start shipping it across the country. So we have one centralized warehouse in Bombay. And from there, all the products go across the country, whether it's through a Quickcommerce channel like Swiggy. So to their multiple warehouses, Swiggy, Instamart, Amazon to their various warehouses through the reseller that we use. Website, we directly ship to the customers. Right. And corporates and B2B clients, which we work with, generally are shipped directly to their, offices or warehouses, right? Distributors and the likes. So that's essentially how our entire backward integration and supply chain works, to summarize.
And because you have a lot of manufacturers, how do you maintain a quality check on them?
Yeah. So quality obviously plays a very important role, right, in food, because even one deviation from the recipe could lead to, some kind of a fungal growth or something or the other. So you have to be very careful. So we have set up very stringent quality control processes. One is we try to control backward integration. So for example, I spoke about, say a product being made. Okay. Like say, let's take dosa khakra, right? One of our best selling products. So now the rice, the urad and the ragi, these are the 3 ingredients. I chose it because it's also a very simple product, right? Which go into it. We control the sourcing of those. They come from our suppliers. So we are the primary vendor. The manufacturer is a secondary vendor. So that way we have control over the quality of the ingredient which is going into the product. So he's not going to suddenly start buying urad of a inferior quality, right? Because we have set standards with our supplier that you will never supply below this quality. Right? Secondly, fat, again, we ensure like a rice bran oil or something, we have suppliers. And see, these suppliers also are getting a lot of manufacturers who are our manufacturers, they are getting as clients.
Right.
Now, these contract manufacturers manufacture for other brands also. They do their own production for exports also. So the supplier is getting, for every manufacturer I give him, he's getting 5x the volume, right, from that manufacturer. So he gives me the best pricing possible. Right. So whether it's nuts and seeds, whether it's fat, whether it's, raw materials like your flours and all, everything is at least 80% controlled by us. Then the seasoning, as I mentioned, is controlled by us. We develop the seasoning with the seasoning companies. So that is one level of quality control. Second is at their facility. So we have certain procedures set up which they have to fulfill. 90% of our vendors are fully automated, which means human intervention is less than 5%. So literally flour goes in from one end and the packaged product comes in from the other end. Right. So that allows us to ensure that, technology is a great QC, hedge, right? Because if you use technology, the chance of things going wrong reduce dramatically. So that is one other prerequisite that we look for. Initially, when we started, we didn't have as much volume. So we had to work with smaller manufacturers. But today we have evolved, or either those manufacturers have evolved their technologies. So that is one thing. Then once the product is manufactured, we we take like a COA, certificate of analysis, from them, which is another QC measure. Then it comes to a warehouse where it is QC'd again, right, by a QC team. We have a in-house QC team, and then before shipping the order, it is again QC'd. But that is obviously it's already packaged, so it is at a packaging level, visibility level. Does it look good enough and all of that? And there are no tears in the packs or anything. So yeah, that's how we go about QC.
And food industry, काफी licenses लेने पड़ते हैं, and especially in a healthy snacking brand. तो ऐसे कुछ permits हैं, licenses हैं जो आपको लेने पड़े?
Yeah. So we have the main license that we usually need is a FSSAI license, okay, and that is something every food business has to have. Even a reseller of the food business has to have it. Then there is your legal metrology. Then there is your, I would say, those certifications which help you, like with exports and all. There's ISO certification and all of that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, outside of that, there are a few others depending on which industry you are in. We are not a manufacturer, so we don't need some of those. There's your Factories Act, there's your, different things. But I would say legal metrology and FSSAI are the main ones.
And how can someone take these certifications or licenses?
So it's fairly straightforward, to be honest. I mean, there are these consultants, who will maybe take a certain charge and handle it. Only thing is it takes time, right? Because anything, all these processes go through a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork. So generally 1 to 2 months minimum it takes, right? But it's not that difficult, to be honest. If someone just Googles FSSAI consultant, they'll find someone, and that person hopefully will be able to manage the entire process. Just you have to ensure that that person obviously has some kind of a basic website and all of that, just to verify that that person is coming from a credible spot, right?
Right. How much is the Indian snacking market, and how much is healthy snacking market, and how much is it organized?
Right. No, interesting point. So market size again is very dynamic in terms of data that is available today. But the Indian snacking market is as big as about $10 billion. Okay. Out of that, I would say about only 40% is organized today. Okay, 60% is unorganized, right? And healthy snacks is a much smaller subset. I would say if you count, within healthy snacks, it's very easy to call everything healthy snacks. It's not snacks. Nowadays, mueslis are called snacks, chocolates are called, but I would say if you only take healthy snacks as a market, it would be around 1500 CR to 2000 CR.
Okay.
But there's not a lot of raw data available. So this is more like an estimate.
But there is a growth that you're seeing obviously in healthy snacking brands, and there is an evolution. What are the trends that you see now are coming?
So yeah, definitely this entire market is evolving at a very rapid pace, right? I think the inflection point was COVID, right? That really catapulted the entire space, and even consumer awareness, everything has increased significantly since then. People are adopting much more healthier lifestyles. They are moving towards premiumization. The amount of disposable income a typical employee in a company who was earning a mid-range salary would be spending on food and discretionary spends has increased so much in the last few years. And what is also happening is, people invest in the market and markets are going well. So they get a good, IRR. They reinvest that into their discretionary income, right? So everyone is moving towards premiumization, right? Just even beauty and personal care, the number of products we used to have before 10 years back in our bathroom has increased threefold at least, right? In the last few years. So the overall consumer choices and preferences are changing. So I would say that is the biggest trend, I would say. Outside of that, I think, people are becoming more health conscious, right? Because of various things. One is, I think the biggest propellant has been social media, right? Today, thanks to social media and thanks to, Geo partly, everyone in the country today has access to these content creators. And whatever you say, there's a lot of myths also floating around.
Yeah.
Okay? But it's a necessary evil, because the actual data which is floating around, the true facts which are floating around are much more valuable to the common man, right? Today, millets have become so popular, right? Government is also pushing them globally. They are recognized by the UN, right? And in India, I mean, right from a common man, Aam Aadmi, to someone who's in that Kolaba Bandra belt also is consuming more and more millets. We have always had these millets in our diets for decades, right? But for some reason, we didn't think they were cool enough, right? And or they were tasty enough. But now through technology, we have been able to make them healthy and tasty. And these are all complex carbs. So they are great for your body from a digestion standpoint, much better than the refined flours that we have been having. So people are rapidly moving towards these kind of products in their daily environment. Second trend is, I would say third or fourth trend is also the fact that the Indian consumer has started snacking much more. Again, because of our lifestyles, right? Especially in metro cities, I mean, our entire day is like a fast wave, right? Of things just happening. So what happens is many people end up skipping meals. Many people have smaller meals throughout the day, right? Many people have a stressful day and their release is having a tasty snack in the evening. So I think that has made us one of the most frequent snackers in the world as a country, right? And it's only growing. The number of meals that people have has been growing. There was a very interesting Mondelez report on that. So essentially, the more people snack, the more people realize that, hey, we want healthier options. And that's what they start looking for. And that's where, we come in, right?
So I read somewhere that millets was firstly the staple of India. And then later, because of British, wheat came into the picture. And because of easy access and everything, wheat became our staple. Now millets has become a superior kind of ingredient that now we want and now is overpriced and getting into our homes.
Right.
What is the other kind of ingredient that's on the hype right now?
So outside of millets, I think, I think it's still not, reached a very mass scale, but prebiotic and probiotic food, gut health is becoming something which is very important, right? For people. People are realizing, especially in India, we have so many masalas in our food that, and so much nowadays people are eating, their diets are also evolving very rapidly to have a lot of processed food. So that is kind of killing our gut microbiome, right? And I think prebiotic and probiotic food is something which is becoming very popular. So we, for example, have this very interesting prebiotic fiber that we use as a sweetener. So it's also low glycemic index. So your glucose spike from it is very low. It's called fructooligosaccharides. It's a naturally derived fiber from fruits and vegetables. And it's used as a sweetener for diabetics because it has low GI. And it's also a prebiotic fiber. So we have chickpeas made with this prebiotic fiber. So we don't have any jaggery, we don't have any refined sugar. It's diabetic friendly. And it also ends up being prebiotic, right? So I think that is one trend. Outside of that, there's another ingredient, quinoa, which has been around for a while now. But again, a very good carb, right? It's a complex carb. It is a little high in protein. So that's gaining a bit of attention, right? Otherwise, I think people are moving away from gluten, right? Many people are realizing they are gluten intolerant, right? Or even lactose intolerant. So people are moving to non-dairy based alternatives, right? We have these vegan cookies, which we launched, catering to that market. And it's one of our best selling products. And we have a way to check if a person is actually buying it because it's vegan, because we have a nutrition filter on our website, which has all the filters. So people who curate based on vegan and then buy, 20% of the people, 20 to 25%, it's a small portion, but 20 to 25% of the people who buy the cookies buy it through that filter, right? So we are assuming that clearly we are servicing a need, right, of the vegan people, because when we build this cookie, the one question we asked vegan people, vegan customers was, what is the one thing that you don't get easily, right? Because dry fruits, everything by default, India mein vegan to bahut milta hai, right? So one thing that they said was, you don't get baked goods, right? Like cookies and all, because main ingredient in cookie is butter, right? Which is not vegan. So we use a vegan butter to make it, right? And Yeah, so that's another trend, I would say, on ingredients which are basically on the rise.
As a consumer, what are the things I should see on my label before buying or consuming any product?
Yeah,
Like ये healthy है नहीं है, मतलब kind of oil also I think palm oil
right,
हुआ तो आप नहीं खा सकते,
right.
मतलब it's not healthy, खा तो
Yeah,
सकते but healthy नहीं है,
right.
right?
No, definitely. I think labels are very important today. So I would say, first, one ingredient you should look at is the sugar content, right? And you should I think before looking at the nutrition table, look at the ingredients. Okay. Also, there is a rule which says that the ingredients are in hierarchy of how much you have put, percentage you have put. So if your first ingredient is, say, some kind of sugar, means the highest ingredient in the product is sugar, right? So look for those ingredients. Try to see that if there's refined sugar use or natural sugar use. Now, we can't avoid sugar completely, or sugar alternatives are much better. Refined sugar alternatives, whereas jaggery, dates, fructooligosaccharides, like I mentioned, and even some of the natural sweeteners like stevia and erythritol and monk fruit are gaining a lot of attention, right? So I think that is one ingredient to look at. Second is maida, right? Many of our products in the country, they call them, made with chickpea flour. But then if you see the ingredients, first ingredient will be maida and second ingredient will be chickpea flour, right? So maida, I think, is a very versatile and dynamic flour. So people get tempted to use it. So try to avoid that.
Okay.
Third is sodium, that you can see in the nutrition table. So in nutrition table, generally there's a thing called sodium. The sodium should not be above 300, 400 mg, right?
Okay.
I mean, 300, 400 mg is also a lot, but for snacking, I mean, thoda salt, India mein to you need salt, right?
Right.
So that is another ingredient. Fat is also one of the important things, right, to look at. If it's made with rice bran oil, sunflower oil, olive oil, ghee, right? They are much higher quality fats, right? But yeah, I think these are some of the things I would look at in a label.
Okay. Things you had to learn to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive list of things, I think, because, and you're constantly learning, right, as an entrepreneur. But I think one thing which came a little more difficult to me was leadership, right? Because when you're so young, leading people is always difficult. You don't have experience. Leadership is one thing which comes from experience, right? So how do you build the right culture? How do you get work done from people, right? That's probably the toughest. Because see, large organization mein kya hota hai, person joins at a junior level, their view is, okay, in 5 years I want to be a manager, or I want to be a VP or a assistant VP or whatever. So they have a goal. In startups, I mean, there is no such hierarchy. I mean, you're a team of 5 people. How you can't become the CEO, right? So I think to motivate them, you need other external factors, right? ESOPs is a great way, like giving them some skin in the game, in the business, right? Explaining them vision to them is very important, right? They should be completely sold on the vision, what we are trying to do in the space, right? Because that vision and mission is what drives me, and that should be driving them as well, right? So that is something, which I try to integrate as much as possible. But yeah, that being said, leadership is one of the things which I've had to learn. And
वो तो experience से ही आया होगा.
हाँ, sorry.
Leadership तो experience से ही आया होगा.
Experience से ही आया होगा. And today also, it's always a constantly evolving thing. With different people, you have to be, lead in a different way to motivate them. You have to find their strengths and weaknesses and push their strengths and try to mitigate their weaknesses, right? But yeah, that's an art, yeah. I mean, I think, if you, if you can manage to become a great leader, I think it can be super helpful, right? In running a business, especially at an early stage. See, after a certain stage, you will have the budgets to have the top-notch people who will lead the rest of the team for you, right? And they have come from leadership experience. But on day one, you're the main leader, right? You're the person they look up to. And I think leadership is something which is very important. Second is, I think, agility, right, in startups is very important. So being very quick and being very data oriented, right? So I think data oriented was my third point, but I'm just combining it. Essentially, data gives you a lot of insight into where the business is going. Okay, and especially being a digital business, we have a massive digital footprint of data. So using that data to take certain quick decisions, okay, and pivoting the business or changing the strategy or changing a product, eliminating a product, adding a product, is, I think, critical in a startup, right? Because you're still figuring out your product market fit, your product channel fit, right? So all these data points and that agility is very important in being able to do that. So these are some other things I would say.
In your journey of setting up a business, online business, and then having manufacturing units and everything, what are the general struggles and challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so I mean, multiple challenges obviously across multiple different areas, I would say. But if I had to summarize a few of them, right? So
Yeah.
one challenge which we touched upon earlier is surely one of the biggest challenges is educating the customer, right? And that's something I've obviously delved into, so I'm not going to go into it again. I think another challenge was even setting up the entire supply chain and backward integration.
Mhm.
Today also, I think we have done a very good job in doing that. I would say very proudly, because today, managing as a young brand 80 plus SKUs, right? The inventory, that also maintaining only 15 days of inventory. We have incorporated a lot of tech. We have, started with Excel sheets. Today we have the, best tech in house, which a startup can afford, right? Set up very solid systems and processes to ensure that, because sales slippage is a very big threat to startups, right? One order you can't fulfill because the product didn't reach on time, you have lost 5 lakhs of revenue, right? So managing that was very important for us.
Mhm.
And I think that is something which was a very challenging area, because see, as a startup founder, there are few functions you can really focus on: marketing, sales. Those were functions which came very inherently to me. Innovation,
Hmm.
operations, finance was something which is, those functions where you have to really push yourself to do well. So it took me a little time. I got the right team in place, and that's why we could. So that was one challenge, I would say. And outside of that, I think another challenge would be the entire manufacturing bit, because while we innovate very quickly, manufacturing a product is a different science altogether, right? Right from the temperature to the final product that comes out, what state it comes in, what the moisture levels are, oxygen level exposure, the nitrogen flushing that we have to do, the packaging technology which we are using to package it, all that matters. So that also is something which I didn't have any knowledge in, right? And that was also our Achilles heel as a business, because if you don't understand manufacturing, even though you're contract manufacturing, it's very important to know how the manufacturing process works. Otherwise, it's very easy for someone to take you for a ride,
Right.
right? So that's something which was a challenge which we have, I think, overcome, I would say.
So you started selling through online business and then to aggregators. So what is your percentage of selling your products through online aggregators? Are you guys also on offline stores?
Yeah. So I'll start with online. We started with our own website, as you know, and since then, obviously, we are present in some of the leading marketplaces. So Amazon is obviously one of the leading marketplaces, and outside of that, there's another new channel which has been growing very rapidly for us, which is called Quickcommerce,
Right.
which is your Swiggy, Instamart, Blinkit, and Zepto. So that is probably our fastest growing channel today, because a lot of our TG, especially snacks, firstly is an impulse product. So that 10-20 minute delivery is beautiful for snacks as a segment. Secondly, a lot of our TG who buy snacks, you're watching IPL, you want a packet of chips, you order from
Right.
quick commerce, right? So a lot of our audience is moving towards QCom.
Hmm.
Okay. And I think today also QCom is a very small percentage of total consumption. It's, I think, grocery consumption, it's only maybe 0.4% of grocery consumption.
Okay.
Okay. And that has become already, I think Blinkit has become $1 billion revenue company. So I think that segment is only going to grow in the coming quarters. And hence, we believe over a period of time, Q-commerce and marketplaces will supersede our website sales. Today, our website sales, I would say, is a little higher than our marketplace sales.
Okay.
Around 35 to 40% of our business comes from website and our own website. About 30 to 35% comes from marketplaces, and the rest comes from offline channels. Now, coming to offline channels, to be very honest, as a brand, we took a call early on that this was in 18-19, that we want to stick to online, being online first. Okay, we'll scale up online as much as possible and then enter offline. So exposure in offline is relatively limited today. We do work with B2B, the Horeca segment. We are present in about 3,000 stores across the country through distributors, right? We work with some modern trade chains, a few here and there, but we
Okay.
have not consciously gone there to scale up offline. Now we intend to do that. Now
Okay.
that we have, I believe, hit a point where online has been established, we have achieved a lot of revenue growth there. I think the next leg of growth will also come from offline,
Okay.
right? Yeah, we have developed some very interesting products because we also realize what works online is not necessarily what will work offline, right? A typical kirana store, which is 83% of retail today, how do you convince him to keep your product? How do you convince a passerby to buy your product? They are not going to buy a 50 rupee packet of chips, right? You have to repackage it. You have to make it a single serve portion. So we have done a lot of work in the backward integration to optimize packaging, optimize grammage, and now we are launching it in GT, general trade, right? And also focusing on modern trade side by side. So essentially, that's our overall, channel split, I would say.
What is your take on D2C versus omnichannel?
So I think, this definition of D2C is going to evolve into omnichannel because, I mean, eventually what is D2C, right? The difference between a D2C brand and a regular brand, okay, traditional brand, let's call it, is that D2C brands generally enter spaces which are dominated by traditional brands for years and no innovation has happened. So I think the definition of direct to consumer is only going to change because today direct to consumer could mean if you're selling through a retail store, also you're directly selling to the customer. Yes, there are channels in between and there is obviously technically a big definition difference. But I feel D2C is inevitably has to incorporate offline into the business model to be able to scale beyond a certain point. And all the biggest companies, whether it's Mama or Boat, all of them have got a lot of their scale from offline channels eventually, right? So I feel eventually the definition of D2C is going to change. It's going to become omni-channel and you're going to see a lot of D2C brands coming into offline channels in the coming years. Only thing is they've already been trying. It's just that for a D2C brand to incorporate the same DNA into offline, like I mentioned, because of the challenges in pricing and packaging is very difficult. So it's going to take time. It's not going to be a cakewalk for D2C brands to crack offline essentially.
डिफरेंट मार्केट्स और बहुत सारे मार्केट्स होते हैं, अलग अलग लोगों को अलग अलग उनका पैलेट होता है, स्नैक्स में स्पेशली. तो वो एक आई थिंक डिफिकल्ट चैलेंज है. राइट. For talking about listing on Amazon, I think it's easy to list. How does this Quickcommerce listing works?
So Quickcommerce, honestly, right now listing is almost non-existent, right? They are not taking a lot of brands because see, I'll tell you, right? So typically Quickcommerce works through a master warehouse in each city. They'll have maybe one or two master warehouses and then they'll have the feeder warehouses, which are your dark stores, you can call them, right? Now these dark stores, each dark store has a capacity depending on the brand. Like Zepto will have around 2.5K ka capacity. Swiggy will have 3.5K SKUs ka capacity. Okay. So beyond that, they can't add only SKUs. So every time they want to add SKUs, they have to remove SKUs. Now they can't keep removing SKUs, right? Because customer loyalty also depends on a product being there when they go back to buy it. So the low performers they remove and they get newer brands. So that's why today to get into, at least in our category, I mean, for a new brand to get into Q-commerce is very difficult. Okay. But typically when we started, we were one of the first brands in the health space. So people knew about us. Blinkit reached out to us. We reached out to Swiggy. And it was a pretty seamless process. I mean, they were very open to it. No listing fees, nothing, right? It was a seamless integration. But once you get on board, if you don't market enough, if you don't build traction on the portal, then there is a very high chance they'll remove you. So I know a few founders who have struggled with that, their product has just been eliminated overnight without even informing because they didn't hit some targets, right? Fortunately for us, snacks is a very good impulse category. So organically, we got a lot of sales. Plus we amplified that with marketing efforts. So we understand search advertising very well because we have been doing performance marketing for our website. So we leverage those capabilities to also use them for Zepto, Blinkit, Swiggy, because now they also have a tech backend. So your entire ads, everything can be managed from them. Right? Okay. So we have a team in-house who just focuses on that and we also do a little bit of visibility and all on the portal. But you have to have a share of voice, basically. You have to have customers coming and looking for your brand. Then if you have done that, I mean, you have won most of the battle. Then I think you'll be around with these guys for a long period. But today, to answer your question, for a newer brand to enter is going to be always difficult.
तो आपके स्नैकेबल के लिए वैसे ही आई हैव सीन कि क्विक कॉमर्स में आजकल हेल्दी स्नैक्स का एक अलग टैब आने लगे हैं. मतलब I'm pretty sure there is a demand कि इसीलिए एक healthy snacks करके एक अलग से एक tab है जिस पर people can go
Yeah.
and check. Recently, I think Snackible went through funding Series A round. Can you elaborate on the process? How was it? Why did you think now funding is necessary?
Right.
And after how many years you thought?
Yeah, so we have actually always raised funding. Since we started the business, my first investor was incidentally my ex-boss, in the company I was working with. So he was a person who wrote the first check. Since then, we have raised a few rounds of funding from HNIs, angels, from quasi institutional investors also, like One Crowd and Mumbai Angels. These angel syndicates, right? So we have raised a few rounds. I think our last round, I wouldn't call it a Series A. I would call it, because we have not raised it from a VC or something, but we have got one of the largest, snack brands family offices who have invested in us,
Okay.
right? So Bikaji family office.
Okay.
So we have got them on board, and they are going to help us obviously with a bit of distribution and a bit of channel expansion, I would say, outside of many other things. But yeah, so the process is a tough process. Yeah, I mean, for a young entrepreneur to go through that for the first time is always going to be difficult. And I mean, we are also going through what people call the funding winter, right? People are not, VCs are not investing enough.
Yeah.
D2C is not the most palatable segment anymore, because
Right.
people are realizing that scalability after a certain point is difficult in D2C unless they crack offline. And cracking offline, as you know, as I explained, is not very easy for D2C brands. There's a lot of re-engineering in the backend that has to be done to crack that channel. So as of now, from a funding perspective, I think if a budding entrepreneur wants to raise money, I think the best bet is to go for these angel platforms, right? There are a lot of them in today where angel investors do it as a diversified asset class. So they are like, अच्छा चलो साल में 50 लाख 10 स्टार्टअप में 5 लाख डालेंगे. And like that angel syndicate will bring
Yeah.
in 200, 300 investors who will invest in startups.
Then after funding, what are your marketing strategies to scale up now?
Yeah. So I think marketing is obviously the biggest driver, right, for the brand. And that's one of the main reasons we raise funding. So from a marketing strategy standpoint, I think we are going to be focusing a lot more on content, right? Content is something which is really the biggest differentiator when it comes to online as a channel, right? Today, you can use content very effectively to break through the clutter, right, which is there in the market, and reach your consumer in a much more effective manner. So we're going to be investing a little bit in content, whether it's short form, long form, whatever it may be. Second thing is, I think a little bit more on the visibility side, right? Especially in offline channels. So whether it is, putting those kiosks where our snacks are put, right? Countertop units, which are put near the cash counter in retail stores. So visual merchandising is something which we are going to be investing in. Outside of that, I mean, typically your Google Meta ads, which we run typically, that's something which we are going to be using very effectively to even amplify our offline channel presence. So these are some of the avenues.
And what is the percentage for you for, brand versus performance?
So I would say performance dominates. It's maybe 80-20, right?
Okay.
Performance marketing is because we are very ROI focused as a brand. So, and we have realized that over a period of time, we have built a strong enough brand. I think our main priority, especially when it comes to online channels, is getting people to our website or getting them to the right platform to buy our product. So a lot of it is performance driven. But now that we are focusing more on offline in the coming years, I believe brand is going to start increasing as a percentage.
So you mentioned about content as your marketing strategy. As Indian consumers are becoming more health conscious.
Yeah.
So what are the basic things you are going to increase in your content as a increasing more awareness on the Indian snacking category?
Right. So, see, I think, today content has to be very relatable and very crisp. Okay. People's attention spans are reducing thanks to Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. So, I think a lot of our focus is going to be short form content. We today focus a lot on getting nutritionists on board to talk about our product, talk about different facets of health. We get influencers. Influencers play a very important role in sending the message across, right? We work with budding actors to create ad films, which are 30-second short.
Okay.
Okay. And they work beautifully well for us in performance marketing and ads.
Mhm.
Again, simplicity is key in those cases. People don't want, very high production videos today. They
Right.
want something which is like logo lagna chahiye, it's made with an iPhone.
Yeah, it's
right?
raw
So,
and
yeah, so
very relatable.
exactly. So we do a lot of in-house content also with the team. That also works very well to get
Okay.
reach, because the algorithm is constantly changing, right? And we have to evolve with the algorithm. Content has become your competitive edge. So that's something which you're focusing on. To answer your question about spreading awareness, we are thinking of different ways of doing that. We are planning to start a podcast similar to this, where we are getting different people specialize in certain fields on board and discussing health, because we believe today the consumer is very curious. They want to know more.
Yeah.
Okay? They have started reading labels. They want to know more about different facets of fitness, health, nutrition. And I think as a brand which is in the space, we would love to be the enabler of giving them that access to that information.
To be very honest, there's so much information right now. The need is to have the right information. Right now there is so much, so clutter. Someday someone is saying this is right, someday someone is saying this is wrong. So I think that is something right now the need of the content is to have the right content
Yeah.
coming from the experts, right? What according to you has worked for Snackable, like the marketing avenues that has worked for Snackable?
So, marketing wise, again, performance marketing. So, we use Meta a lot. So, Instagram and Facebook, mainly Instagram. And generally, reel based ads work very well right now. Before, it used to be story and feed based ads, but now reel based ads work.
Okay.
Okay. Outside of that, we use Google for search based ads and AdWords and display ads, also to retarget customers. Retargeting is very important for us, retention, right, as a brand, because snacks again is a very impulse category. It's not a need based category. Acha, today if you don't have your favorite snack, you'll eat something else. It's not like a toothpaste which you need every day, right? So what we realize is retention plays a very important role. So we use these CRM tools.
Okay.
We use a company called WebEngage.
Mhm.
They are a AI based, machine learning based a tool which can send customized emails, customized SMS, WhatsApps to customers, depending on their purchase behavior. So it's very targeted, right? So if you have bought makhana in a particular flavor, and if your order is above 500, your average order value, and if you are from a metro tier 1 city, the email that will go to you will be different from another customer, right?
Okay.
So it goes that in depth. So retention is a big avenue for us in terms of marketing. WhatsApp is the leading in that.
Okay.
I'm sure each of us now have been, inundated with a lot of WhatsApp forwards from these brands,
Mhm.
which we land up archiving. And now I think WhatsApp has come up with a rule as well. As a customer, you can't get more than 5 WhatsApps a day. So
Okay.
all brands will be bidding to get your attention, right?
Oh.
Because WhatsApp realized brands are constantly sending text messages to customers, so they have limited it. But WhatsApp was a very effective tool. I mean, to retain customers, because people have stopped reading emails. To be very honest, right? The amount of spam you get on email is so bad that you have just stopped opening your personal inboxes, right? So WhatsApp is again a very effective tool.
And you have worked with content creators and influencers for
Yeah.
Snack. How has the experience been?
Yeah. So again, obviously, content creators are a very good gateway to get reach, okay, and get good quality content at a fair price, right? So there are 2-3 ways we work with them. One is a typical barter approach, where we give them some free snacks and a box of snacks, and they promote the brand. Another way is to do some paid collabs, where we expect them to generally do like a reel with the brand and incorporate it into their lifestyle. Again, we ensure that they are actual fans of the product, right? That's
Okay.
important, because they should know the product, they should understand the product, they should understand the health benefits of the products. So that's something which we always, make sure. And outside of that, these reels now, there's a very interesting way to get reach through these collaborations. I'm sure you must have seen on Instagram, this brand has collaborated with
Yeah,
this
yeah.
brand. So that both the parties get access to each other's database, right? And for an influencer, the advantage we have is we have about 180K followers on Instagram, 185K. So they also get access to that pool, right?
Right.
So a lot of our collaborations are unpaid collaborations. We don't believe a lot in content creators doing paid collaborations. As a brand, that's just a philosophy. There's nothing wrong in it. So we usually do it in a barter format and give them access to our database, do these collabs and the likes.
How much has it worked for you, if you may say, and what kind of content creators is something that you look for?
So honestly, it's very tough to measure, right? I know there are UTM links and all to measure it, but I think content creators and influencers are
Mm.
definitely a very effective tool. So we make it a sure, decision to every month send out at least 70 to 75 boxes to influencers. Many of
Hmm.
them don't even post about us. Some
Hmm.
of them post about us. And I'm sure it helps in some way to create brand visibility, but you cannot compare it to performance marketing,
Hmm.
right? It's not a ROI driven avenue. It's more for branding and it's more for visibility, more for awareness
Hmm.
and to build credibility also. Because today, as a customer, let's say a consumer, you see my ad on Facebook or Instagram. Now, what motivates you to click on that ad and buy,
Hmm.
right? You don't know if you can trust the brand. You don't know if the product is good or bad. The best way to get validity today is a influencer that you follow telling you, hey, this is a good product. Right? So though credibility is something which is losing its value to creators because nowadays influencers and creators are endorsing so many brands
Hmm.
that the audience is becoming a little more skeptical as to who to trust and who not to.
Yeah.
But it's still a very effective tool, I would say.
Yeah. And what, according to you, is the marketing mix should be for any D2C brand, either they're new or they're emerging or they're established brand?
Yeah. So I think marketing mix should be simple. Yeah, I think focus on social, right? It's the cheapest, most effective form.
Hmm.
Build content in house as much as possible. High production videos and high production content is not worth it in today's day and age. If you can and if you have the budgets, do it as an experiment. But short form, quick content works better. Have an influencer vertical, send products to influencers and do collabs, barter collabs with them, right? Get content from them. That is
Hmm.
even better. You would rather work with an influencer who has 10 or 20K followers, but makes content for you, which you can further use in the ads,
Right.
right? Rather than someone who basically will charge you a lot and you may not be able to afford that influencer making content, right?
Hmm.
So, influencer is surely one. I think to retain customers, emails are very important. If you have a small database and if you're a young company, call customers. I think that is the best way, right? Yes, we do get a lot of spam calls also today,
Hmm.
but if you know it's from a brand that you have liked, you would take it and give honest feedback, right?
Okay.
So that's, I think, very important.
Hmm.
And from a offline perspective, again, focus on BTL activations, right?
Okay.
Be in events, co-working spaces are a great. Figure out where your TG is,
Hmm.
right? And try to be in every avenue that your TG goes to.
Hmm.
Right? If your TG is working in corporate buildings, set up stalls in corporate buildings. Co-working spaces, set up stalls in co-working spaces. Right? Uh, if they are traveling a lot, be in vending machines at airports. Right? So beauty about FMCG is that you can be in practically every environment, right? Where your consumer is. So try to be as many places and be as visible as possible for your customer.
But this would be for new and emerging brands. Now, what about established brands? What should they be doing?
So I think established brands, one thing which established brands really undermine, okay, is their online presence. And when I'm saying established brands, I'm talking about traditional brands, right? Now, obviously, they are starting to realize that they are building a lot of content, they are building a lot of social media presence. But today, I don't think they still have the finesse that younger brands like us do, right? So I think for established brands, that's a great avenue. Outside of that, I mean, if they are established, I mean, they have budgets, so ATL they can do, right? Hoardings and OTTs again become a very good platform to connect, right, with the customers because a lot of the TG goes there, right? Airports nowadays have a lot of, like Adani has this thing where they set up stalls in every airport and they promote certain brands with free sampling and things like that. Again, Q-commerce channels for established brands, like if you can give 5 lakh samples, Zepto will get you literally whatever your TG is. Like if you're selling face wash, and if you want to target people who typically have a AOV of about this much, who live in certain geographies, who are only females. Zepto will allow you, Zepto or Swiggy or this one will allow you to target 5 lakh of those people with a
Okay.
free sample.
Right.
But sampling cost is very high for a young brand like us, right? But for a large established brand, sampling is a very effective tool to
Right.
introduce the customer to the product.
Right. How do you use your packaging as a marketing touch point?
So again, see, packaging, there's one aesthetic aspect, right? We focus on that. Our packaging is very minimal and very clean. And secondly, the claims that we have. Okay. So on our packaging, we have a few claims that we put, like gluten-free or rich in protein, source of protein. So that is again a great marketing tool. Thirdly, the packaging in offline channels is slightly different from online channels because we have a lot of SKUs. Offline channels, we have obviously the pictorial representation of the product, whereas the online channels we don't. Okay, because packaging, again, for 80 products, to invest in that much, there's a cost associated with making customized packaging. So we have kept it very minimal and clean, whereas offline channels pictorial representation obviously helps. The back of the pack, we use a lot of the story of the brand. We focus on the story of the brand, mission that we have as a brand. I mean, we don't try to make nutritional facts and ingredients a marketing tool, but by default they become, right? Because we have a healthier product in the market. So we focus a lot more on that, bring that out in the packaging. Many people put small ingredient ka font. We don't need to do that. We put ingredients in a normal font,
Okay.
right? So I would say these are some of the ways.
So has the branding evolved from since the inception, or has it been the same?
Yes, definitely. I mean, when we started, I remember I use a freelancer and told him, listen, I have an event coming where I'm launching the brand. It's my soft launch. In 20 days, I need an entire design made, right, for the branding. And for some 25,000, he did a fantastic job. And I used that for a good 1.5 years, and then switched to a different set of branding, which we got some professional agency to do. And then recently, in the last few years, I think 3 years back, we changed our branding again.
Okay. What is one marketing mistake that D2C brands are doing?
Yeah. So I think one mistake is not focusing enough on your customer, right? You get so, like, obviously product is important, definitely, right? And you should talk about product, right? But somewhere you need to use these D2C marketing platforms, right? Like social media and all, to also connect with the customer. That's what most of the larger established brands in the West or even India have done, right? And I think that's something which some of the D2C brands need to learn. But many of them have become very good at it. So I would say very few of them don't do this. But yeah.
And marketing lessons that you've learned through your journey.
So I think one thing is, people say that to focus a lot on brand in the initial years, but as a young brand, you have to be frugal, right? You don't have lavish budgets. So any marketing dollar that you can spend on getting a customer to your website and converting them for a D2C brand is in the start a little more valuable than building the brand. Because once you have a customer base, once you have a proof of concept, building the brand becomes easier. Secondly, you also have the rolling cycle of revenue coming in, right? Which you can reinvest to build the brand. So I would always recommend people to do that, not spend too much on branding, not spend too much on packaging in the start, right? Because you'll make, and it's worth it in some cases if you have the capital, do it. Okay, branding and packaging is very important. But startups are agile, yaar. I mean, in 1 year, you at least test a product in a lean manner, experiment, get validated learnings, incorporate that into your product, and in next year, you'll be much better at it, right? When you have the resources and you have the bandwidth.
If you could go back to your younger self, what are the learnings that you're going to tell that person about,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship?
So, I mean, couple of things I would say. I think, one is that I think all young entrepreneurs, right, before they start, how much ever confidence they may portray they have, they are always doubting themselves, right? So I would obviously tell myself not to doubt myself because, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, entrepreneurs are capable of doing much more than they can imagine, right? When they actually get their hands dirty, get into the business, you realize that there's so much more that you're capable of doing, right? So that is definitely one advice I would, give myself.
And throughout the journey, have you learned the secret sauce of hiring the right talent?
Oh, I've still not. Trust me, it's hiring, I think, is probably the most difficult thing. But yeah, I've obviously gotten better at it. And there is no secret sauce. I think one thing I've started relying more on is my instinct, right? I think that is very invaluable because, I mean, eventually India is such a competitive market. If you tell a recruiter, I want people from this education background, okay, this profile, this work experience, he'll get you 20 people, right? How do you differentiate between them? Right? And how do you know that the guy or girl is the right fit for your culture, has the ambition, has the the discipline to and the work ethics, right? Which is so important in a startup. So and because our budgets are low, we generally, startups generally hire young. So younger people are tougher to judge. Someone who has 20 years of experience are very easy to judge based on the experience they've had. So I think I think instinct is very important, which develops over time. I think, some things which we focus on is we focus on certain educational institutions, right? Where we know we have had good experiences. One more great way is to get interns to become employees, right? I think if you get good interns and they do a good job, I think making them an employee is always going to be much more effective than hiring from the market.
हमेशा से अपन सोचते हैं कि बड़े होंगे और जॉब करेंगे, फिर एक प्रमोशन होगा, फिर गाड़ी खरीदेंगे, घर खरीदेंगे, कोई जॉब नहीं पसंद आई तो हम स्विच करेंगे. बट एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप में ये सब नहीं होता है. वो आपको बहुत पहले सोचना होता है कि हाँ चलो हम एक हम बिजनेस स्टार्ट करेंगे, बट उसका माइंडसेट शायद बाद में आता है. तो वो माइंडसेट आपने कैसे आपको लाए वो अपना?
I think entrepreneurship, you don't have much of a choice, like you mentioned, right? Once you take the leap, obviously there's always an option if things don't work out. And I think people look down upon that, but I think it's a very, good decision sometimes. When you realize that you have gone into a wrong space, it's not growing. And if it's not working out and it's not somewhere where your passion lies, it's smarter to take that experience and start something new, right? But that being said, I think entrepreneurship, once you get in, you figure out your own way because you have a lot of control over what you're doing, right? So in a job, I mean, you're confined by the responsibilities, KRAs, which is set for your job. Whereas in entrepreneurship, tomorrow, if one category is not working, I can just eliminate that and start a new category, right?
Right.
There's much more control and flexibility. So that allows you to create have some level of, I would say, mental control over, where you're heading and what you're doing.
But here you are the person who is responsible if it's working or it's not working. Right. So wo adaptability.
Right. So I mean, definitely, I mean, that's a fair point. I just feel it comes over time and it's something which people can develop, and obviously it's challenging. I'm not saying that I remember in the first few years, there were days where I would just question, am I in the right space? Am I in the right segment? Maybe I'm not running the business well enough, right? Maybe that's why scale is not coming, right? But I think the secret sauce to solve that problem is time, right? If you spend enough time, I think these problems get solved on their own.
And during such challenging times, how do you take care of your mental health? You have to be the rock for your team.
Yeah.
How do you be the rock for yourself and how do you take care of अच्छा आज मैं एक day off लेके थोड़ा अपने आप को unwind करता हूँ, कुछ सोचता हूँ, थोड़ा backtrack करता हूँ. Do you get that opportunity?
See, mental health is very different for different people, right? For me, I think I've been fortunate enough to deal with the issues and the stress of the business in a much more calmer way, right? I'm not denying that I've had sleepless nights multiple times, right? But it becomes a part of your life after a point. Unwinding, yes, obviously, I think every entrepreneur should find time to unwind, but it's also a luxury, right? So there's always a cost attached to it. So while I try to do it maybe once a year or something, taking a day off is something I'm just very uncomfortable with because
sometimes it comes with the guilt also.
Yeah.
How can you enjoy a lot of things left? A lot of things. अगर अभी काम नहीं किया तो फिर कब करोगे?
Right. Exactly. And that's the thought process which typically, most entrepreneurs go through. And I think that's why it's very difficult to kind of take a pause, right? I know for a fact that, even on international trips which I've gone to, with family and all, I have somewhere or the other, I have to land up working, right, for 1-2 hours. So there's no switch off switch, right?
Right.
And in a job, you get that benefit. So on a weekend, when you're doing a call with a vendor, sometimes you're like, boss, kya ho raha hai? I'm not being able to even catch a break. But I think, so there are days obviously which are tougher from a mental health perspective, but it's somewhere you just have to accept that this is going to be your life for a few years at least, until you build the business out and enjoy the ride,
And any life learnings and advice that you would want to give to the aspiring entrepreneurs?
So I think one thing is, sometimes we accept defeat very easily, right? Especially in the initial years of entrepreneurship, because you don't know much. You're like, hey, this is not working out, right? And I mean, success is just around the corner sometimes. So keep pushing. Don't give up very easily. I think that would be one. Second, uh, I think people are very important, right? People are very underrated, but probably the most important part of your business journey. So
Right.
have the right people around you, right? They should come with the right mindset. Someone may be very highly educated with a lot of good experience, but if that person doesn't have the right mindset, if
Right.
he or she does not come in with the perspective of building something with you, but they are coming in just to build their resume, they are not the right people for a startup, right?
Right.
They'll do well for sure in their life, but you need someone who comes in to help you build this business. You need smarter people. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, sometimes you also feel that, hiring people who are smarter than you,
Right.
it's
Definitely.
difficult because you're like, how will I manage them? But they are the easiest people to manage actually. And they're the people I've learned from the most, right?
They're actually necessary for your growth.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, those are some of the learnings.
Thank you, Aditya, for being here and sparing time for Localpreneur Podcast. It was lovely having you and learning from your experiences.
No, my pleasure as well. And thank you for having me.